Hello everyone, welcome to Lemongrass Live. My name is Jo Bennett from Lemongrass, and I'm very pleased to also welcome our three contributors today, Ben Lingwood and Mark Hurst from Lemongrass and Jonathan Lake from AWS. Just before we start this session, I just wanted to let you know that this is being recorded and we'll share the link with you afterwards. But for now, let me hand over to Ben to get things underway. Thanks.
Thanks, Jo. So morning, afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. So this is a bit of an informal session, an open chat we're going to have just for 25 minutes. Talk about some of the experiences that we had with our SAP to Amazon migration. So keeping it low key and conversational. Just to encourage you, if you've got questions or things that pop into your mind through the session, feel free to come off mute, raise them in the chat session. Keep it organic. So with that, let me just ask my friends and colleagues here to do a quick introduction. So Mark, let's start with you.
Thanks, Ben, and hello everybody on the call. So my name is Mark Hurst. I run the EMEA region of Lemongrass, which I've been doing for just over 4 years now. Prior to that, I've got about 30 years background in the SAP industry, both as a practitioner and as a practice lead. All of that has been kind of large enterprise SAP orientated across many industries. John, do you want to hand over? Okay.
Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, Jonathan Lake. I look after the SAP business in the UK within AWS. I've been at AWS a couple of years, but I've worked in the SAP industry for now, must be about 25 years. So I headed up the SAP practice at Hewlett Packard and worked very much on the functional and technical side of SAP. So thank you very much. Back to you, Ben.
Okay, I'm not as old and wizened as my two friends here, but been in the SAP space for about 23 years. So I look after architecture and innovation at Lemongrass, in the industry a long time, and previously was head of engineering in SAP for their own cloud platforms as well. So with introductions made, let me bat this over the fence. Firstly, kick off the conversation with Mark. So Mark, you're clearly one of the oldest and wisest and wizened people here. So just to throw the question at you, what do you see customers looking for commonly in their business case? What are the common issues that bubble to the surface?
I forget what wizened actually means, we'll come back to that later. Interesting kind of question actually. So if you look at what our customers ask us for, kind of engage us to, and what they think their business case is when they initially engage us. So actually, I think for most of them, when they actually start the conversation with us, either they have no idea what the business case is for SAP on the cloud, or they have a very simplistic view of what that business case is. And that simplistic view would be, I need new hardware for my SAP system. I want to get the cheapest bit of kit, whether that's from a cloud or an on-prem or whatever it may well be, provided possible. And for many, that's as far as the business case goes at the outset. And that's a shame for two reasons. Number one is you're simply viewing SAP on the cloud as infrastructure replacement is it's not the most, there is a case there to be made, but it's not the most compelling case. But secondly, it kind of avoids, it undermines and neglects a number of the real benefits of getting SAP on the cloud. And for me, there's 4 or 5 real benefits of getting SAP on the cloud. And those are things like, as far as possible, using cloud technologies to simplify your SAP solutions. So going as cloud native as possible for things like clustering and monitoring and those kind of good things. Secondly, there's an opportunity when you migrate SAP to AWS to actually modernize your estate. Don't just simplify it, but modernize it. So go to a more strategic or a lower cost database, go to a more strategic or lower cost operating system. So that's the second area where the business case usually kind of stacks up and delivers kind of savings. The third thing is that a lot of our clients, if they have some business case, tend to be kind of focused on BAU support. What are the kind of cost reductions I get from reducing hardware costs or operational costs? But actually, a lot of the benefit of getting an SAP on the cloud is about doing projects and change differently. So if you get SAP on cloud well, that enables a different way of delivering projects. You've got infinite capacity to do projects, you do those changes quicker, potentially cheaper. For many of our clients, that alone delivers a 20% saving and also 20% acceleration on the time it takes them to do their projects and change. A good example of that would be TfL, where we are, the main reason, Transport for London, the main reason we're doing that project there is to simplify their development landscapes and reduce their time to deliver change. And the fourth area, in terms of where our clients tend to deliver cost savings or improvements, is a fundamentally modernize and transform the way they deliver or operate service for SAP. So if we get this right, once you've got SAP on the cloud, it's not just a question of just running the SAP estate in the same way that you've always done it before. You have access to increased amounts of automation, you have access to self-healing, you have access to machine learning, etc. All of which fundamentally help you achieve what I think is a fundamental outcome for many of our clients, which is really driving down the operational cost of support and trying to automate that as much as possible. So there's a kind of the four kind of major areas our clients tend to end up creating a kind of business case around SAP. But actually, Ben, to yourself, actually, from a technical point of view, supporting the kind of areas I've just talked about, where do you see the technical benefits of SAP on the cloud?
So let's look bottom up. It's an interesting one, right? The common trip ups we see in RFPs sent to us and what customers ask us and where we see them saving the most money, I think for me falls into a couple of distinct areas. So firstly, sounds simple, right? But architect for the cloud. So you'd be surprised how many organizations still ask for a bit of a lift and shift, which means all your technical debt of the past, your design and your infrastructure, which is predicated on physical boxes, racked or hosting mindset, often shapes the way these systems are bolted together in the first place. So without those constraints, I'd say a lot of organizations make the common mistake of actually asking for systems to be moved as they are into the cloud, and it means you just scratching the surface on the benefits case, right? Kind of misses 80% of the benefits case. So for simple things like right sizing or turning systems on when you're just using, or simple things like that, actually lift the lid and actually ask your provider to re-architect the solution based on how you're using it. Look at the Early Watch reports. Great way of looking at how to do that. Don't bring over your technical debt. That's exactly what we did at National Nederlanden, for example, big insurance company in the Netherlands, who were based on physical kit sizes, fixed Lego bricks. We could take big chunks off that by re-architecting about how they used it. And that kind of links into the finance architecture to make sure you're buying the systems in the right way for the way you intend to use them, or your business is currently using them. So put that business lens on the bottom up. And the last one I'll just comment on, because it's kind of near and dear to my techie heart, is think about SLAs. And there's always I guess a bit of a lens in our industry where people lock on, I don't know, 3 nines, 4 nines, and then blanket that across everything. Actually think about how you use those systems. So it may be that you need more extreme recovery metrics for your systems of record, but quite often when you look at it, some of those systems don't need such extreme SLAs or recovery metrics. If, for example, if it's more of a back office solution. So have a think about fine grain. You don't have to paint everything with the same SLA. Design it around how you need that to be available, because there's a big lever on the cost as well. So that's another gotcha that we see in certainly the technical business cases. So I think what comes out from all of that is a sort of a predominant theme in cost savings. And a lot of people obviously are procurement focused on that. So John, just let me back that one to the left here. What are you seeing in Amazon? What are the key magnetism areas that you see organizations coming into Amazon from the cost saving perspective?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Ben. And I have to say, obviously, this is one of the key questions that we get asked. And to answer that question, first of all, we have what we call an AWS Cloud Value Framework, and that's really been developed based on feedback, literally from thousands of real customer business cases. So if you take the SAP market, we've actually got an independent organization to benchmark more than 1,500 customers across must be around 26 industries that we've worked through, and we've done very detailed analysis on what the profile of those customers looks like and the benefits that they've realized. And as you say, the first thing that everybody scrutinizes is what does the business case look like in terms of those cost savings. What the result of that independent analysis is very interesting. First of all, the minimum savings that customers have achieved is somewhere around 27–28%, but typically customers are actually realizing cost savings of well over 40%. An example recently, actually, we've just moved Burberry's workload onto AWS. All of their SAP workloads have moved over to us. and certainly they're achieving cost savings of around 30 to 40%. So the savings are very significant, and obviously it's driven by all of the things that you've mentioned. But actually, whilst there's huge scrutiny on that area, there's a lot of other opportunities as well, and often organisations overlook some of the non-financial benefits, which is really where I think Lemongrass have got lots of expertise. So back to you, Ben, really, to answer that question.
Yeah, non-financial benefits. I'm going to show my techie roots again here. So for me, innovation is always a key one. So let's just think, just 2 months ago, right? Let's just think recent history. So if you just think recent, what we've seen GP3 come out. So that's 20% more performance for 20% less cost. We've seen some of the new R5 systems come out. We saw Elastic File Store, EFS, go 3 times on performance just in the last sort of 8 weeks. That's just what I'm thinking back. So these are just some of the examples where that dynamo effect with Amazon always drives cost-saving improvements and technical benefits for to Mark's point earlier on downtime back into customers. So we've just done this for other end of the planet, Super Retail Group in Australia, a massive retail conglomerate, literally just switching out all of their systems to GP3, pumping them up onto EFS. Just a really easy way for them to save month-on-month cost savings, just surfing that innovation wave. So I think one of the key things when you're looking at that is make sure, however you're designing architecting, more importantly contracting, make sure you've got access to and immediately get the benefits, access into the Amazon innovation releases. So that's a key one. Modernising your environment, the way you work, Mark touched on it earlier, so the DevOps way of thinking, building systems when you need them, thinking them more as ephemeral entities than sort of fixed assets, and being able to use native Amazon services as well. So refactor, that's another real key non-financial one, because SAP tends to drag over lots of non-SAP applications and solution spaces for that as well. And I guess the last one is thinking beyond SAP. So everyone's heard of data lakes and the growing trend on that, and we've seen that a lot in our industry area as well. So whether that's for example, we do the data lakes for Heineken, and then they pull out their data from SAP, from non-SAP, and put that all into an Amazon-centric data lake. That's a great example of using Amazon technology for way more than it would need just for SAP. Or Convatec recently, another life sciences company which we've just taken live, they wanted access to automation, simply to improve their operation, to bring down their downtime. In a pandemic time, downtime is simply something people can't afford. So you see those really as the key drivers. So with that in mind, let's bring it sort of back to business. So Mark, let me throw that one as well. What are the trip hazards do we commonly see coming in from organisations when they're looking at achieving their business and operation aspirations from cost perspective?
Yeah, and I think there's well, I mean, I think what I'm learning from this conversation, we probably need more than half an hour. So can I keep it kind of to the kind of top 4 or 5, kind of, as you call it, trip hazards? I think that the first one's an obvious one, and extremely basic observation in terms of number one is make sure there is a business case, i.e. write it down, make sure it's expressed, and then track against it. Because a number of times we see people with some form of a business case, whether it's automated, whether it's operational cost reduction, or whether it's DevOps or whatever, they do the project and forget about it, it never gets delivered. So number one is add a business case, write it down, and track against it. The second thing is, and again, there's a big one for me, is the number of people that think they can simply take their SAP system as it is today, with all the baggage that exists in it in terms of clustering and kind of historical data and all those kind of things that have been there for decades, and simply lift it and shift it and drop it onto any cloud, whether it's Amazon or Azure or whatever, and suddenly get agility and cost reduction. I think a mistake. And so trip hazard number 2 for me would be, don't treat this as a lift and shift. There has to be some element of optimizing for the cloud, or simplification, or transforming, whatever you want to call it, but don't just lift and shift. I think the third thing for me would be, it's interesting, when we get into a sales process, post business case, it's always focus on what does the project look like, how long will it take, what will it cost, what are the risks, how do you mitigate them, etc. But the project you do once, you live with the operation for the next 5 or 10 years, or whatever it may well be, and actually for many decades in SAP sense. So So for me, it's less about the migration approach. You should take it as read, we can do that, or another partner can do that for you. For me, it's about getting operations right for two reasons. Number one is actually with the operational team that actually really drive out the benefits, so making sure the costs are reduced, continue to be minimized, making sure that DevOps gets launched, whatever it may well be. But secondly, operations itself is a huge cost reduction opportunity. We deliver more operations through automation, self-healing, etc. And the final major trip hazard for me is whether it's a trip hazard or learning, is that automation is absolutely key to making this work. So an example of that would be if you want to increase agility and maybe reduce costs through kind of self-healing. Agility can only be enabled through automated provisioning, automated system copy, those kind of things. So automation, and specifically SAP on AWS, SAP on cloud automation, is absolutely key to enabling the business case for SAP on Amazon. And actually, Ben, I know you all, it's very close to your heart in terms of automation and close to your role as well, actually, your job. You want to talk about automation in a little bit more depth?
Yeah, it's a bit of a dark art. A lot of people don't think about it when they look at business cases or cost saving. And there's very obvious ones to think about, such as provisioning. Click a box and the SAP system appears. Great. So that certainly has a place when you're looking at that. But I think more importantly now, when you're looking at a business case, look at the things that you're doing repetitively, as you mentioned earlier, Mark. So if you look at your SDC and there are things that whether there's a change event, building a box, patching a box, doing something, if there's anything you're doing repetitive with labor, it's absolutely possible to do programmatically. Now, everything can be described as code these days. So take a look, to your point, take a look at the SDC and look at those repetitive areas that you're executing, or where you've got really expensive labor or skills performing tasks as well that can be programmatically described as well. That's a real key one to look at. So that's one axis. The other one is looking at things like near zero downtime. So actually, automation can decrease the amount of downtime that you need. So something like, there's modern methods for things like patching, detecting issues, preventable downtime. You mentioned AI earlier, Mark, so that's a great way you can look at anomaly detection over an SAP system, trick we use. So that's a real key area I would say look at when you're looking at automation. Look at that benefits case of where you're spending labor and time. So I've just seen there's a bunch of questions popping in, Joe. Do you want to filter a couple off maybe for the field here?
Yep. Just the first one that came in was, does the benefits case differ based on the platform? So perhaps AWS versus Azure is what the person asked.
Well, I can be really unfair and direct that to John. I think. There you go. Tell me about the competition, John.
I thought I might get that one actually. So yeah, I think with AWS, obviously the first thing that I would say on that point is experience. So obviously we've got more than 5,000 customers, and that experience really does count for a lot. And certainly we're different in that sense. We've got that unique experience, and we've been doing this for more than 13 years. The other area I would say is our ability to provide that automation. Certainly working with Lemongrass have brought that to a next level as well. So our ability to automate with Lemongrass really does differentiate in the marketplace. And then the third particular area I would say is the level of availability and operational resilience is really where AWS really sets our competitors apart. So our ability to provide the most robust levels of availability and disaster recovery really do differentiate us. So I would say they would be the biggest points of all that make us different.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that one. Let's see a few more people typing away, but some others we've received. So I think it's Mark that mentioned that benefits sit in operate, or significant benefits sit in the operate phase. Could you share a little bit more light on that, and what are some of the priorities you would suggest to a prospect or a customer?
So operate's interesting actually. Again, to the point I made earlier, it's the bit that persists for years after doing the migration. So getting every pound you save per year obviously gets magnified over a number of years. So it's an important area to pay attention in terms of cost saving. And you know, combined with that, in some ways, nobody likes spending money on operations. You know, every pound you spend looking after a system, keeping it available, keeping it fixed, etc. All those kind of things is a pound you're not spending on change and business improvement. So minimising operational spend is obviously, for me, is a core aim of projects of this type. So in terms of where do those cost savings come, it's back to the point, you know, some of it comes back to the point Ben made earlier in terms of the automation, and actually the point John made in terms of that automation being enabled through AWS. So repetitive tasks, you know, things like monitoring, or maybe less monitoring because that's fairly obvious there, but things like file system management or table space management or availability management, system uptime, downtime, all those kind of good things can easily be enabled through automation. And obviously the more automation you have, the less people you've got doing that kind of thing. And similarly, again, less on the BAU support side of things, more on the project support. Whereas previously, you know, the commissioning of an SAP system in a kind of as a copy of production with all the kind of backup and restore and all the things you need around it could easily take 3 to 5 days of effort for and if done manually. If automated, it could be done instantly and actually be done by your project teams rather than your support teams. So automated provisioning, self-healing, but also a big one for me is actually beyond the automation, which is, yeah, Amazon delivered something like, was it 2,000 innovations last year? Somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, but a large number of innovations, all focused on driving down the cost of their infrastructure and the service it provides. So something the operational teams need to do is keep an eye on those innovations, evaluate them, and then use them to drive down the cost on a continuous basis in your operational teams. And then I think the final thing for me is back to that point I sort of made earlier, the obvious point I made, which is the business case gets delivered, the savings get delivered, the kind of the DevOps benefits get delivered, not as part of the migration, but as part of the operation post-migration. So your operational team need to focus on measuring the benefits, make sure they're being delivered, and then taking action to make sure they are.
Thanks.
Okay, very good. I think
Joe,
we've got time for
conscious of time, let's move to our wrap up and sort of keeping the spirit of keeping this podcastable during the coffee. So, what suggest we do to close away? Could I ask each of my distinguished friends and colleagues here to give me your top 3 takeaway points back to the topic in hand here. So let me start with you, John. What would be your 3 top takeaways from this topic?
I would say the first thing is preparation is really important. So, you know, before you start any journey to AWS, make sure you've done that preparation, you've done that upfront design work, you've looked at your estate to make sure that it's optimized. I think the second thing is to choose a partner that you can really work with and who has got sort of really excellent expertise in deployment of cloud native capabilities, and that's where I might say, don't want to be cheesy, but certainly Lemongrass bring a lot of expertise in terms of that. So I think that's really important. What I would say as well is that the business case, when I worked through it, invariably the workload is oversized when we do that business case, and once you're in AWS, there's a lot of optimization opportunities once there. So certainly continuously look at that, and I would say it's really important to continuously innovate as well. So don't think that you can do everything at once, but gradually bring in the innovations and capabilities and automation, and look at the innovative areas of AWS as well around things like data lakes and IoT and machine learning and all those other areas that really do make a huge difference to your business. So those would be my top tips.
Right, thanks, John. Mark.
Yeah, so I agree with everything John's just said there, actually, but maybe to add 2 or 3 others that we have talked about as we've gone through. So number 1 is just make sure you do build a business case and then track against it. Number 2 would be, again, we just talked about this, one of the questions just asked is more, for me, the important bit is not the migration, it's the operation. Make sure Operate delivers the savings and continues to track savings and kind of has a continuous improvement type approach. And the third one I think is important, but gets missed a lot of times. You're lifting and shifting a workload to the cloud, any cloud, I think misses the point and will not deliver the benefits and the kind of business case that most people expect. So there has to be some element of optimization to even achieve the most minimum benefits by moving to the cloud. So those are my three things, very succinctly done.
Okay. So that leaves me with the slim pickings in the end. No, there's plenty there. So for me, I think that the three things that I call out, back to the points I think we started on, architect for the cloud, really stupidly obvious one in a way, but you'd be surprised how many times we get asked, to the lift and shift point there. Don't constrain yourselves with your current design, take a fresh pair of eyes, look at how the system is working, being used, and how it needs to operate to fine tune that from a cost perspective. So I said that's the first one. Second one for me, with a bit of a commercial twist, is make sure you don't get locked in. We see a lot of organizations still moving it to the cloud, but then handcuffing you in to say, right, this is your run rate for the next 3 years, and they'll come back and talk to you 24 months later about that renewal that they want. So to make sure that you've got immediate access to innovation releases, price improvements as they happen. So make sure you're getting the most of surfing on that wave versus being locked in. And then the last one, I know we've mentioned it quite a few times, is just don't forget that automation twist, especially as Mark said in operations. So that can really take big chunks off your operating costs when you've got the ability to automate repetitive procedures. And if you look at SAP landscapes, most of the cost sits in the operate. That's where most of the labour and overhead is over a 2-3 year period. So that'd be my three. So with that, Jo, let me hand back to you.
Thanks, Ben, Mark and John. That was great. Thanks for your thoughts and perspectives. I think it's certainly given us food for thought, to say the least. We did have a few questions, actually, we've not had time to answer. So I'll share those afterwards with the guys, and we'll follow up directly with the people that asked them by email. We will also be sharing the recording of this session, as I said, so we'll send that in a follow-up email. But there is also further information on both the AWS website and Lemongrass as well. So plenty of further information to support this session. And in case you weren't aware, Lemongrass Live is a monthly session. We try and pick a hot topic that our prospects, customers, and the industry are talking about. We've already got them scheduled for March and April. So if you're interested around writing and developing RFPs for operating in the cloud, or if you're looking more at the well architecting aspect that Ben just spoke about, then those are the sessions that will run later in the year. But yeah, they're on the website as well. But for now, many thanks for joining us, and we wish you a good rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.